35 years after a deacon and his wife were murdered in their Camden County church, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation reopened the case last week. The Georgia Innocence Project and the family of Dennis Perry, the man convicted of the crime, say that new DNA evidence implicates a different suspect and exonerates Perry. For nearly 20 years, the murders of Harold and Thelma Swain were a closed case. They were shot to death inside this African-American church along Highway 17 in Waverly, Georgia in 1985 after a white man came inside during a missionary meeting.
He said, "I want to speak to him." And he peered into the church, pointed at Harold Swain, and that's when some of the women looked over and got a quick glimpse of him through the swinging doors.
Attorney Susan Simpson is host of the Undisclosed podcast, which investigates wrongful conviction cases.
In 2018, we covered the case of Dennis Perry in season 3 of our podcast.
She says as Harold Swain was talking to the man, the women heard a scuffle, then gunshots. Thelma Swain ran to help her husband.
And as soon as she pushed open these swinging doors to the entryway, she was shot once and died. And Harold Swain was also shot 4 times, and he also died in the entryway.
For 15 years, police had little to go on other than a pair of eyeglasses found near the victims' bodies and a composite sketch. But in 1998, a new lead investigator was brought on board to work the case. He focused in on Dennis Perry, who was arrested in 2000. Perry's grandparents lived here in Waverly, not far from this church, though he lived hundreds of miles away near Atlanta at the time of the murders. His family believes that his arrest was politically motivated because it was an election year, and solving the cold case could benefit elected officials.
No money, no family ties to power. He was just easy. It was easy to pick him.
Perry first became a suspect years earlier after a tip was called in saying he resembled a sketch of the killer, but he was ruled out.
This is one of my favorite pictures of me and Dennis because he was so happy.
His wife, Brenda Perry, says he had moved on with his life.
So he was cleared
by the GBI agents.
There was no reason for him to look back over his shoulder because he knew he was innocent. He just went on with his life. And like we said, and then they stopped him and that day in 2000 and he ain't been home since.
While no physical evidence linked Perry to the scene, the state built its case largely around the testimony of a now deceased Camden County woman, who the jury and defense were not told was interested in and would later receive a large reward. She testified Perry, who had dated her daughter around the time of the murders, told her he was going to kill a black man who didn't let him borrow money. Perry was convicted of the murders and agreed not to appeal his 2 life sentences in exchange for the death penalty being taken off the table. Now, his legal team says new DNA evidence proves he is not the killer.
To sit there for 20 years for something that you didn't do, it's hard. You know what the hardest part is when you go to visit him, he doesn't hold any grudge. He holds no anger.
In April, Perry's legal team filed a motion for a new trial based on new DNA evidence they say connects a prior suspect to hair found on the glasses at the crime scene. The evidence is strong enough that Perry's attorneys say it's unlikely he would have ever been prosecuted if it had been available then.
This is also a person whose DNA, mitochondrial DNA, was found at the scene and who has also confessed repeatedly to the crime and also had a pair of glasses that looked exactly like the ones that were found in the church and had been lost the week of March 11th when the murders happened in 1985.
Perry was part of the 99.6% of the population of North America excluded as a contributor.
His DNA wasn't at the scene. He didn't even wear glasses.
I think it's a travesty of justice.
Retired GBI investigator Joe Gregory testified at Perry's trial. He said he vetted Perry's alibi and believes he'd been at work near Atlanta more than 4 hours from the church the day the Swains were murdered.
How convinced are you that Dennis Perry is innocent of these murders?
100%. We could put Dennis Perry in Jonesboro, Georgia, within just minutes, you might say, no more than an hour prior to the killing, and it was impossible for him to get from Jonesboro, Georgia, to the church. He could not have done that.
The prosecution's theory always relied on Dennis Perry being some kind of drug-addicted vagrant who was down on his luck and who dealt in hard drugs and who was a racist and who wanted to kill a black person. And none of that fit.
Based on the GBI findings, District Attorney Jackie Johnson's office says she will review the case and decide how to proceed.
He has paid for something he didn't do for 20 years, and I just hope this is going to finally get him out of there.
Justice will be that person arrested and brought to trial for the Swain murders, and to let my cousin Dennis Perry go. It's time. It's time for the DA in Brunswick to do the right thing.
Now today, the DA's office told me that a hearing on Perry's motion for a new trial has now been scheduled for July the 13th. As for the man who Perry's legal team says that DNA links to the crime scene, we have not been able to reach him, and he has not been charged in connection to these murders. Now, if you have any information that can help investigators, the GBI is asking that you give them a call. That number, 1-800-597-TIPS.